Welcome to everyone who's attending the session this afternoon. I've just been through the attendance list and it looks like a very wide group of people. So welcome to all of you. Just to let you know that I will be assisted in this session today by Ben Gammon, who's part of my team, and he's head of TfL's digital services, of which we feel very proud. So thank you, Ben, for that as well. So let me just take you through a very short set of slides that gives you some information about what we have done, are doing right now, and are planning to do in the future about safe journey planning. Ben, can we move to the next slide, please? So I think it's worth saying that we have a very strong track record of innovation in digital, and actually some of this goes back to the days before digital as well. If you think about the things that the underground has done over the last century in terms of clear signage, clear information, etc. In many respects, we are world leaders in providing people clear, consistent information. But in the more recent past, so we brought the first journey planner in 2003, and then the real sort of wave of innovation started around 2008 with our open data policy. Again, among the first transport organizations anywhere in the world to open up all of our operational data so that other people could come in and build applications on top of it. We started providing disruption information through Twitter and through other electronic means in 2012. We changed our website to become responsive so that it's not just fitted and formatted for a widescreen computer, but also adapts automatically to things like mobile phones and tablets and other means by which people may be consuming our services. The open data policy from 2008 resulted in a unified API in 2014 that made it much easier for the third parties using our data to access all of it. And then in 2017, we first came up with the first app that we had put out, really, TfL Oyster and contactless, and also came out with a travel bot, which allows people to interact and seek information through, Facebook and other means of that kind. Last year, we launched a new electronic service information board. These are the rainbow boards that you see at stations. They have been around for a long time, but they got refreshed with a very new look and targeted towards providing the right kind of information. And then only last month, at the beginning of last month, we launched our first travel planning app, which is TfL Go, and we'll talk a bit more about that. Next one, please. So let me start with open data. Again, starting in 2008, we've been providing open data for use by third parties. Our philosophy has been that any data that's not covered by the Data Protection Act, as in, or now GDPR, in terms of personal information, should really be opened up to third parties and to customers in general. So things like tube arrival times or bus arrival times, that's dynamic information, but even the static information around mapping, all of that got opened up starting in 2008. It's being used by about 675 apps, lots of thousands and thousands of developers. In fact, I think it's fair to say that we played a fairly important role of catalyzing the whole app development industry in London. It's a huge industry now, of course, but back in 2008, it was very nascent, and our opening up of the data allowed a lot of this thing to happen. We also feel very proud that for many people entering the software development market, including school children, one of the ways in which they can build something that they can touch and feel and feel that it's useful to them is by converting our open data into applications, that tells them the time of their own bus, for example. So very proud of the fact that the open data policy has been very successful, and as you can see, it's being used by many people. Citymapper are probably the most well-known among all the app developers, but the same data is being used by others. It's also being used by Google and Apple to power Google Maps and Apple Maps. Next one, please, Ben. So because we had open data, we've by and large tried to stay away from developing and launching apps of our own. But nevertheless, there were specific markets in which there was a need to develop apps, mainly because of the payment interface, which cannot be provided through open data. So the Santander Cycle app has been around since 2015, the Oyster and contactless app since 2017. and the pay to drive app, which you can use for paying things like the congestion charge since 2019. And that was, using the powers that we had always reserved for ourselves. That we've never actually left the app market for, we've never said that we wouldn't enter it ever. But these are specific cases around payments that made it necessary for us to enter it. So if you look at the Oyster and contactless app alone, for example, in terms of total downloads, nearly 2.5 million downloads by now. London is an Apple-heavy market, so not surprising that the majority of the downloads have been on Apple. But the growth continues even now. I mean, if you think of the fact that 2.5 million is nearly a third of London's population, and actually probably more of the adult population, that's a pretty good figure that we have right now. Next one, please, Gary. Ben. So now, having done all of this, we were then looking at what areas the market was not providing for. And there were two things in particular that struck us as being important that the market was not really providing for. One is that the mass market solutions are not really catered to people who have special needs, whether they are mobility needs or whether they are support in journey during disruptions. In fact, we all know the feeling of when the tube is disrupted and people get told to leave at a station that they don't know, and they come out into the sunlight and they have no idea what to do next. So our idea around TfL Go, which is our new app, was that we need to start providing a personal travel assistant, not just a travel assistant, not just a mass market product, but actually a personal travel assistant for everyone in London, which allows you to make the right choice at the right time. And equally, it provides us with a bit of information to cater to the needs of people who are sometimes missed by the mass market. Next one, please, Ben. So it's often useful to go back right to the very beginning to start designing these things. And we started by going back to Harry Beck's much-loved tube map, back from the 1930s, which has been the method by which people navigate around London. But the question is, how do you take that very iconic map and adapt it for what we need to do today in the 21st century? So Beck's map was the starting point. And we kept our focus, along with the map, on providing information in real time. So how could we redraw the map in response to things that are happening on the network so that the information that's being given to you is in a format that everyone's come to recognize and love, but is useful at the point at which you need the information. So, we've developed a data-driven map, which provides you with real-time status information, and it provides you with simple routing information, which can change depending upon any disruptions that are going on the network. Next one, please, Ben. So, some of the issues that we were trying to address with this, the vast majority of people with a disability of any kind report that their disability limits their ability to travel, which is not a great place to be. Now, when we say disability, especially if you look at mobility impairment, that is a very wide topic. And people have this perception that mobility impairment means being in a wheelchair. And actually, the fact is that it's much wider than that. So as the data says, 60% of Londoners have required step-free access in the last 6 months. Well, this is data going back before the pandemic, in the 6 months before the pandemic. But there are many things that cause mobility impairment, having luggage and heavy luggage, or having buggies, or small children, or pregnancy, or you might go out skiing, break your foot, come back, you're still mobile, but you're not able to navigate the stairs and the escalators as well as you would have, and so on. So this perception that mobility impairment is only a very marginal, small thing that happens to a small number of people in wheelchairs is just not true. It's actually a much more widespread issue. And on the day that you have heavy luggage is also the day that you're unfamiliar with a different network that you face because you've never had to use it when you're unencumbered by heavy luggage. So our purpose around TfL Go was to produce a product that is inclusive by design. So we started again with the step-free printed map, which has now been in existence for nearly 15, maybe even 20 years. When the step-free printed map came around, that was a huge improvement from not having that kind of information at all. But when you look at it, just look at that map, it's really complicated. It's got all the information you need, but you need to be really skilled at reading maps to figure out um, how to navigate it. It's also not reflective of real-time status. So a lift being out at Westminster Station is not going to close the station, but it might close it for you if you require access to that lift. And when you think about the fact that Westminster Station is also an interchange, it might close many more journey opportunities for you than just Westminster. So the printed tube map, unfortunately, is just not good enough. And we have struggled. We've tried very hard, and we've had many means of providing this information through Twitter handles and so on and so forth. But the fact is that it's very hit and miss about whether us putting that information out actually gets to you. So starting point, Beck's map, the printed map, and this real-time information. So what we've done is now combined all of this into TfL Go, where with completely new data sets that we never had before, around things like step-free access and toilets and lift status and so on, we can now give you a tailored journey, a tailored approach to planning your journey, with or without step-free, with or without other constraints on it, that tells you not just whether a station is step-free, but also whether it's level access at the platform, where you might need to be at the platform to get level access. Again, for those of you who've used the Jubilee line, you will notice that there are signs over there on the platforms that says, if you want to exit at Wembley Park, board the train here. If you want to exit at some other station, board the train somewhere else, and so on. That is quite a lot of information to present in a static map. But on the app, we now have a means by which that information can be presented much better, and only the relevant information to your journey is presented to you, and we don't overload you with unnecessary information. So we provide you with complete step-free routing as a result of this. Next, please, Ben. We've also made the app itself inclusive by design. So it's at the heart of the app itself. You can people have site difficulties, in which case the app adapts to dynamic type, which is a feature available in smartphones. Ours, I think, is the only app that actually does this. You can go from landscape mode to portrait mode, just to be able to see the information that you need. Voiceovers and talkback, which are functions that Siri and Google have had for some time, are now enabled in this app, because if you have visual difficulties, you can get audible instructions as well. All of these are features about trying to make it inclusive for people with with special needs. Next one, Ben. Now, we were developing all of this, and then the pandemic hit us, and it prompted us to look again at what we were developing and our priorities and launch timelines. So we had to accelerate some of these things because it was necessary for us to put out COVID-related information in a much better manner than we were able to do with any previous tool. Next one, Ben. So we brought forward the launch of TfL Go and incorporated facilities that are very relevant to the kind of information that we need to provide today for COVID. And I know this has been a demand from many people about getting clearer information about when they can travel and how they can travel and so on. So the app now provides you with information about quiet times on the times that you're looking for the journeys, for the type of journeys that you're making, for the stations that you're making the journey from, what are the quiet times when you might get the better opportunity for social distancing. Messaging like you must wear a face covering, it's a reminder to everyone, but it's important that the reminder is provided to you in a format that's easy to read, easy to access at the point where you want to access information of that kind, and a huge focus on putting walking and cycling information in there as well, because that's what we want to encourage, especially during COVID, but even otherwise. So that's all out there in the market, and it's been used by tens of thousands of people in the time since it's been launched. Uh, we are now working on integrating bus arrival times. We probably wouldn't have launched the app without bus arrival times, but it was necessary to accelerate the deployment of this because of COVID. So we are incorporating bus arrival times and bus stop information, uh, but also developing the app for Android, which is probably about 25 or 30% of the market in London, and those will be out in the autumn as well. And then eventually, where we want to take this is that you know our overall ambition is to create a customer digital platform, which is an umbrella for all of the digital services that we want to provide. It'll be a huge refresh to the last refresh of our digital platform, which was basically our website refresh in 2014. This is a fairly substantive piece of work, but we need to keep incorporating this into our future development. And that's where principally what we want to do is create one integrated account and one integrated payments platform. So Oyster and cycle hire and congestion charge and all of those things can be brought together, and the customer can manage all of their transport activities in an integrated view, but also get one integrated view of the information that they need about traveling around in London. So that's where we're going next. And next one, please, Ben. And then separately from the app, the other thing that we're working on, as I mentioned earlier, is the refreshed electronic service update boards. These are the rainbow boards that have been around for a long time. As you will see, in the past, where the rainbow boards came from is that they were a very static rainbow chart where we had color coded all the lines, and we used to physically stick something on it to say what quality of service there was. That then got incorporated into a digital map. But again, it's leading to information overload. So you'll see this is a much cleaner design. It takes less time as you're going through the gate line to see something of this kind, and it only highlights those lines on which there is a delay. It also tells you where the delay is, which is really important, because if you look at that chart for that picture, for example, the Metropolitan line may have a delay between Baker Street and Aldgate, but if you're traveling from Finchley Road to Chesham, it's not something that's relevant to you. So that's coming. A few stations have had this upgrade already. That work was unfortunately interrupted by the COVID crisis, but it is going to get rolled out on other stations as well. Next one, please, Ben. And then we developed a mobile service for the NHS Nightingale Hospital, which is at the Excel Centre. This got developed in record time. It really within the short space of about a week or so, we had an app of this kind working. Thankfully, the Nightingale Hospital did not get used in any great way, but the hospital is still there. It's been kept in storage and abeyance. It may still be needed during the winter months, and if it is needed, then this app will be available for safe travel for NHS staff to and from the Nightingale Hospital. So quite a few things going on. If I step outside our digital world, then our call center is still there. People can still get access to information and guidance through the call center. Our station staff are still there, and they're also there to help you make journeys and plan journeys, especially if you have any safety needs or mobility needs. So those things have not gone away. But what we are trying to do is to provide a new digital platform to overlay on those things that have already been there to provide everybody an inclusive environment in which to travel in London. We care deeply about every single customer in London. We don't care about what is stopping you from travel. Our purpose is to try and make it easy for everyone to travel, and these things are in play just to make that happen. I'll stop there and see if there are any questions.
Great, thank you, Shashi. It's a fascinating introduction to the app. There are no questions just at the minute. I'm sure people are furiously typing away, and there'll be some flooding in imminently.
Ed, I can see a few.
Oh, can you?
I can see four. I can see 5 questions. So why don't I take those? I can read out the questions and then take those.
Please do.
The first one is, will you implement PAN accessibility digitally? This is difficult to achieve as consultants seem to focus on just one area they're knowledgeable in, example, visually impaired or auditory impaired. How will you overcome this across the network? So let me address that. The first thing, there are two things to say about it. The first is that we have a design team that's internally within TfL. We're not relied upon consultants to come in and do this work. We have a design team that's really fired up um, and very caring about the needs of all customers. And the whole idea of TfL Go and its development is happening with Ben and his design team, all of whom work directly for TfL. The second thing to say is that we have an independent disability advisory group within TfL. It consists of people with very wide backgrounds, including people with mobility impairment or visual impairment and so on, but also people with autism or learning difficulties and things of that kind, of hidden disabilities that may not be taken into account in the same way. And the Independent Disability Advisory Group is helping us design what we want to do with digital information as well. So if I could offer you some comfort, Catherine, this is not something that we're going to be restricting only to those things that have been known about and talked about for some time. It is looking at disability in the widest possible format. Next one is from Stephen Boone. Thank you. Really interesting presentation so far. What scope will there be for third parties to integrate with your wider platform? I'm thinking specifically about London Council's taxi card scheme, which TfL largely funds. Well, Stephen, well, thank you for asking that. So two things. One is that we want to keep all the information that's being developed in the course of TfL Go also open, so that third parties can come and develop that. But equally, we want to work with people like you and others who are doing transport related things, even if it's not what we do, and try and incorporate that as much as we can into all of our services. So I think that's a very fruitful discussion that we can have, and I would absolutely encourage that to happen. Another one from Catherine. I've used the Quiet Times app for my local tube station, and I didn't find traveling at those times particularly quiet. Full carriages. What percent of commuters would you class as quiet, taking into consideration COVID restrictions? So, Catherine, so I look at this data every day. In fact, I've spent more time looking at travel data for the last 6 months than anything else. We have, thresholds beyond which we would call a carriage unable to provide social distancing. And the quiet times that we are advertising, we can provide social distancing across pretty much the entire network in those times. In the other times, so in the not quiet times, the system is still able to provide social distancing, except in a few locations. Now, there are always exceptions to this. And the exceptions are that you may find a gap build up in the service and a particular train that you're on gets very crowded. Or you could have something unusual going on at your particular station that results in a larger number of people entering the station at any one time. So it's very difficult to control for it and make sure that every single train is respecting social distancing at every single time. On buses, we've been a bit firmer about this because bus drivers have been given the discretion to put up a sign on the front of the bus that says the bus is full and not take any more people. It's just much harder to do that on the trains. Question from Rico Pieri. Would it be possible to have the opportunity for pavement level tube status screens using TfL legible London signs or business screens, for example? So Rico, our approach to this has been that information is being provided by open data, and any third party that wants to put up those screens can. And you do find those screens available in some places like Canary Wharf, but the cost of putting up those screens is fairly substantial, not just in terms of the screen itself, but providing power, providing a network connection to it, and keeping it maintained, which is one of the reasons why it's not become very popular. There are other cities, St. Paul, Minneapolis, St. Paul, for example, put a lot of effort into it, including sort of providing incentives to third parties to come in and do that work. Eventually, it turned out to be a bit of a fizzle. mainly because most people are accessing this information through a mobile phone rather than through on pavement screens. Question from Miles. Price. Can you update us on when more flexible ticketing options might be offered by TfL? Our occupiers tell us staff are wanting to buy season tickets to benefit from the discounts, but can't be certain will need all the days and carryover options. Bigger digital carnet offer with cheaper bulk tickets. So, Miles, let me make this. So this is something that I'm very passionate about. So let me make the point here. So we in TfL have had pay-as-you-go and daily capping for 15 years now. The rest of the transport industry has not had anything of that kind. 5 years ago, we changed the pricing of our pay-as-you-go so that a daily cap is now 1/5 of a weekly cap. So whether you work 1 day a week or 5 days a week, proportionately, you're still paying the same amount of money. And that was a very substantial change to our pricing policy to level things for people who are working part-time or working full-time but only commuting part-time. We would love to do the same thing with longer dated season tickets as well, but the constraint on that is not us, it's National Rail. In that respect, it's very promising right now that the government is making preparations to respond to the Williams review that's been going on for some time. One of the recommendations from that seems to be creating more fairer pricing systems for National Rail, and we hope that there will be movement in that. But by and large, the question about part-time season tickets and all that has already been addressed in London. And if people are asking you that question, please direct them to us, and we'll be very happy to answer that for you. Next one is also from Miles. Do your station staff update stroke feed into the app on a real-time basis to give real-time update into your apps and or how busy the stations are? So yes and no. With TfL Go, there are some things where we want this to make this completely real-time. So in particular, things like the lift status or escalator status or things of that kind, which is information that's available at stations, is being incorporated into other apps, but has to then be copied over and integrated with TfL Go. That is coming. In terms of how busy trains are in real time, that is very, very difficult to capture. It's obviously information that's changing every minute. We've tried looking at the automated sources of information where we can get that, try to incorporate that into our app. Unfortunately, by the time that data is processed and ready to be published, it's far too long for it to be of any use to people standing at a platform. So not the most positive answer, unfortunately, Miles, but we are looking at that and we are continuing to look at that. It's not technically possible right now to provide that information fast enough about crowding. Next one is from Samantha Campbell. How well are river services integrated within the new app, or what are the future plans to do so, especially if accessibility, step-free travel is key? Riverbus is well placed to help with this. So right now it's not, but in future developments, we would like to incorporate river services, as indeed any other services in London, into the app. And thank you for reminding us of that. Ben, if you can take a note of that, we should definitely try and do something on this one.
Yeah, so river services are there in terms of journey planning. So if you plan a journey and a river service is the most appropriate route to take, then it will appear. But we certainly haven't done the work yet on things like piers to give information about the accessibility of piers, that kind of thing. And we haven't flagged those on the map. But yeah, I'd agree, Shashi, definitely something for us to look at.
Thank you, Ben. And Richard Dilts, is TfL planning to include shared transport options such as bike share and car share in the app in the future, particularly thinking of the journeys and areas where public transport doesn't have a great offer and the current capacity constraints of the TfL network itself? So, Richard, in some respects, that's an almost obvious question when you're trying to do something of this kind. We would like to, but keep in mind that that's an area where people are very protective of their own commercial interests. And so it's a softly approach. I think the first step here is to try and get all of public transport into the app. And then we will think about what we can do further with other shared mobility systems that we don't own or operate. So Ed, that was all the questions that were on Slido. I'm happy to take any other questions that people may have.
Thank you, Shashi. Yeah, I've managed to log in and find the right room now to be able to monitor the questions more appropriately now. While people are thinking, I just wonder, I think we haven't quite touched on where the app is available. And I wonder if there's any more detail you can provide on when it'll be available on Android.
Ben, did you want to take that one?
Yeah, so we're working hard at the moment on the two things that Shashi mentioned, so buses and the Android version. And we are aiming to get the Android version out in the autumn. It will have a few differences to the iOS version, but that's often the case with apps. But yeah, we're aiming for the autumn for Android.
And Ben, there's a question on Slido, which I think if you could take on, that would help as well. Following on from Richard's question, what interest is there from train operating companies to work with TfL on the new platform? Can you talk a little bit about what trains information we've already got on our journey planner and what we are planning on incorporating later?
Of course, yeah. So at the moment we have national rail journeys within Journey Planner within the London, well, actually outside the London area as well. So if you plan a journey from, say, Richmond, where I am currently, into central London, it will take you on South West trains. What we would like to do, and what we've been working very hard on, is making that data live. So at the moment, if you plan that journey, you'll get a journey based on timetable information. But what's critical is to give customers the real-time information that Shashi talked about earlier. And to do that, we need to base those journey plans on real time. So if a train goes out of action or if the schedule changes, we can reflect that in the journey that's played back. The next area of interest for us then is looking at the stations that are on the map, as well as giving live arrivals times for our services, giving live departure times for National Rail services as well. So for Euston, we give you both our services and National Rail services.
Thank you, Ben.
Sarah Hope, I see that you have your hand up. Did you have a question you wanted to post in the chat or on Slido? Perhaps not. I'll just refresh the Slido to make sure that Sarah's not typed anything in. I can't see anything. Sarah, did you have a question?
Hi. Oh, sorry. Hello?
Yes, we
Hi,
can
Sarah.
hear you.
Oh, yes. No, sorry. I did have a question. I hadn't pressed send. I'm really sorry.
Go on.
Yeah, no, my question is, I've been my daughter's been in a wheelchair recently, and I have been struggling around London. But even though I do sort of work for TfL with the Sarah Hope line, I didn't know about the TfL Go. And I wondered whether or not TfL would consider advertising it more to the public, making it more widely known.
Well, so Sarah, I think all of our advertising and everything has been disrupted by COVID. The app has only been around for about 6 weeks now. It has been downloaded. Ben, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's about 40,000 downloads or something of that kind now.
Yeah, about 42,000.
Yeah. So part of the reason why we haven't done more publicity on this is that we'd like to get the Android app out there as well, just so that we're being properly inclusive and everybody being able to use the app. But in terms of marketing and all that, as you know, the biggest channel that we have for advertising is our own network, and there are far fewer people using the network itself.
Okay.
Yeah, but I mean, absolutely, we need to publicize this more, and we'd like more and more people to use it.
Because it seems like a good service. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, it would be good if more. Well, I would have liked to have known about it myself. I just didn't know about it.
Yeah. I mean, you can find it on the iTunes App Store.
We've seen it's beta phase currently, so it gives us a really valuable opportunity to make changes quickly. And there are some things in the stuff that we've launched already that we've already made changes to, and we'll be making additional changes in the coming weeks. So it's a beta phase now for this, and it will be a beta phase for the Android product when we first launch that.
Yes.
Yes, we'd like to make a much bigger noise about it after that.
Okay. Right, thank you. Sorry.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Sarah. So Shashi, I think that's the end of the questions we've had in, and people have had a couple of minutes to add any in, and they don't seem to have. So I think we've answered everyone's questions and covered a fair bit of ground there. So I think at this stage I will take the opportunity to draw just in the nick of time there. Miles Price has asked, what new tech innovations are we working on for the future?
Well, Miles, that's a very broad question. Lots of things happening in the organization around some that are customer facing, some that are very industrial in nature, but are still tech innovations to try and reduce our cost of operations. So lots of clever things going on about the way we manage our assets, make it more condition-based rather than, make the maintenance of our assets more condition-based rather than time-based and so on. But in terms of the customer platform, the customer digital platform, of which TfL Go is the first part, is the biggest thing that's going on right now. We're also looking at how we can take the contactless system outside London and give more convenience to people outside London, people who've not had this convenience at all. So there's things of that kind that are going on. Things to do with artificial intelligence in terms of, again, with things like asset monitoring and so on. So there's a lot going on. If you ask me, I would like for much more to be going on. But as you know, for the last 5 years, we have been in extraordinary financial pressure. And one of the sort of consequences of that is that the organization has really been in the mode of cutting cost rather than thinking about innovation. The current COVID crisis is not going to help in that respect at all. But this is one of the reasons why we need support from you and from others in making the case that these are innovations that help us, TfL, of course, but they're helping London, by providing a cheaper and better service, and they help us as a country become the most innovative place in the world and so on. So we do need to have the support financially to be able to go and do some of these things. And I couldn't lose an opportunity of this kind with a very senior group of stakeholders to make that point, because that point needs to be made to government all the time as well.
Thank you, Shashi. And I think a point well made at the end there. I think there's an offer from Richard in the chat there to follow up on how his organisation, Como, can help involve car and bike share in the app moving forward. I've had another question come in. A point from Mars that he's happy to help with digital files and posters that could perhaps be put up in shopping centres or office receptions. I think Mars is from British Land, just for context there. And then another question from Stephen. There is a temporary restriction on in place on using the Freedom Pass during the morning peak. Do you know when this might be restored? Accepting that this is perhaps this is to be negotiated with the government.
So I think Stephen's kind of answered the question himself. This is all subject to the funding agreement with government. The restriction that was placed on using Freedom Passes and 60-plus passes in the morning peak was as a result of the funding deal done with the government back in May. And so I can't really answer, when this is going to get lifted, because it's entirely subject to future discussions on funding with government. What I would say, though, is that compared to all the difficulties that the city is going through, and especially the need to maintain capacity for people who need to get to work or children who need to get to school, we have to keep these restrictions in that context. I know it's not fun. I know at the end of the day, it is a restriction, but the need to maintain social distancing in the peaks was really quite important. We've had a wonderful return to school. A lot of planning went into that. For many months, we really started planning the return to school in June. And when you think of all the different things that were done, including providing more bus capacity, restricting buses to school use only, providing children with more information, working with schools to provide better walking and cycling facilities. We put a lot of safe walking routes. I think 800 or 900 projects that were done across London in very short order to provide safe walking routes. There's a huge amount of effort that went into making sure that the return to school was smooth. And the fact that it's gone well over the last 3 weeks is not an accident. It's a result of a lot of very hard work. So, you have to keep these other restrictions that are being put in place in that context where returning children to school was definitely one of the highest objectives that the government had and we had.
Great, thank you, Shashi. Again, I think we have now exhausted questions. Oh, one more. Typical. It's a live issue.
It's a comment.
Yeah, from Stephen. A comment there rather than a question. So I think again, I would take this opportunity to draw the session to a close. Just before we do go, just to give people a bit more time to post any questions in case there is anything burning that they do want to ask. We have some further sessions coming up with other members of staff at TfL. Those are available to sign up in the same place as you did for this session. So they will be covering our street space programme, how we've communicated with customers during the COVID crisis, and one on how we're managing our stations throughout the crisis as well. I think the next session is due to be on the 6th of October, so please do sign up if any of those are of interest. Thank you, Shashi, for your time and for joining us this afternoon. And thank you, everyone else, for joining us as well. I believe Teji will be able to share a version of the slides with you after the session. And if you do have any questions, please do not hesitate to get in touch. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your afternoon in the sunshine. Thank you.